This third mini lesson of the series is introducing restorative practices. Brene Brown referenced shame in her TED Talk on vulnerability. Here is a visual of the compass of shame from the work of Dr. Donald Nathanson, a professor of human behavior at Jefferson Medical University. This visual helps us to understand students' misbehavior from a more compassionate standpoint, as the normal manifestation of not having their own needs met and what they did in turn to lash out against either themselves or others. You're going to be reading an article about the compass of shame in the links that are given below this mini lesson. And I'd like you to think about students you've encountered or athletes you've known who acted out in some of these ways against themselves and others, to think about as you're going through this framework and to see how it can be used in the real world. Next, we considered the social discipline window. Think about a time you experienced as a student, a parent, an athlete, or a coach when someone was doing something to you. How did it feel? Do words like punitive, harsh, disciplinarian come to mind? Now think of a neglectful situation and how that looks. Someone who does not have high expectations and no real support system in place? Does it look like an immature person, not in touch enough to take responsibility? Like a child who promises to care for a new pet fish, but leaves the fish to manage without food until a parent comes to the rescue? Or perhaps a young single mother at her wit's end and being overwhelmed with her child's temper tantrum? If you move on in the window and think of stereotypical hippie generation parents, you might think of permissive practices, those with lots of love and support for the kids, but not with many structured expectations. This chart of the social discipline window shows what happens when you have different amounts of high and low control in your expectations and high and low support in how you're giving encouragement and nurturing people to meet those expectations. The restorative practices fall within the with portion of the window. In restorative practices, we are striving for more of a climate in which high expectations are held, but high support is also present for the students. In the literature, this is often dubbed the title of being a warm demander, someone who believes in her students and holds them to high expectations, but who also creates scaffolds and supportive classrooms with individual practices to nurture those students to join her in the belief that they can achieve those lofty goals for not only their learning, but also their behavior and their social skills. At the end of this mini lesson, you're going to be looking at the links under it, and one of them is an article from the International Institute of Restorative Practices. This organization is considered the gold standard in conducting professional learning opportunities and in publishing resources to understand how restorative practices work. Interestingly, restorative practices began in prison and juvenile justice settings, in which they found this approach to building a real sense of community so that disruptions and mistakes, when they occurred, the incarcerated individuals did start to feel a need to make amends and restore the relationships with their other community members. For years, some schools and districts have been trying to implement restorative practices with their students in classroom communities. The key to success in these efforts is a real belief in the philosophy of creating a sense of community instead of seeing the classroom as a place where rules need to be followed in a way that's reinforced with punishments and rewards. Implemented with a real commitment to the process of building a caring community, restorative practices can be a highly functional and dignified way to build character in students to take responsibility for their own actions and to make amends and sincere efforts to change their future behaviors for the better. Relationships are critical to life. We are neurologically wired to seek relationships with others. Even from birth, infants who are given physical care still fail to thrive unless they are held and nurtured. Behavior is heavily influenced by the quality of the relationships around us. If you change how people see one another and feel about one another, then behavior can change quickly too. In a restorative mindset, the best way to deal with a problem or incident is to bring those involved together and discuss what happened and how people have been affected. The next step is to help people take responsibility for their poor choices and then decide together how the harm can be repaired. This is much more positive than punishing those whom we judge to have wronged others. We all need to learn the following: that mistakes and poor choices are a normal part of growth and learning. In fact, no one is really learning unless they're making mistakes or failing. No one is perfect. We need to stop, listen, and understand how to take responsibility when our behavior has caused problems for someone else. When a child is a poor reader, we teach foundational reading skills and give him lots of practice and feedback in reading tasks. When a child shows disruptive or poor behavior, we often send him to the office. We don't send students to the office for poor reading skills, yet we do for poor social skills. When we have the mindset that all children can learn, we realize that we need to teach and support these social skills just like we do the academics. If you are interested, the International Institute of Restorative Practices contains many inexpensive or free resources to purchase or download, and you can read more about how to implement restorative work. Just go to their website for the International Institute of Restorative Practices. And now, look at some of the resources below this module so that you can explore a little more on your own about restorative practices.